"You killed my father," he said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper that made her skin prickle. "Tell me, who sent you? Or did you do it for revenge?" "No one sent me," Adana said, her voice trembling but defiant. "I didn't kill anyone. I'm a caregiver, not an assassin." "Are you?" His free hand came up, bracing against the wall beside her head, caging her in. He leaned closer, and Adana could feel his breath on her face, could see the war raging behind those beautiful, unforgiving eyes. "The security footage was deleted. The camera in my father's room. Someone wiped it during the exact time you claim you were getting water." "I didn't delete anything," Adana said, and despite the hand on her throat, despite the fear coursing through her, she met his gaze steadily. "I don't even know how to do that. Convenient. It's the truth." They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension that was equal parts dangerous and electric. Adana was acutely aware of every point where his body almost touched hers, his hand on her throat, his arm beside her head, the scant inches between them. "I should kill you," Jin-soo said, his voice cracking, his mind raging and confused. "That's what I do to traitors. I make examples of them." "I'm not a traitor," Adana whispered, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm innocent." Jin-soo's thumb moved against her throat, tracing the line of her racing pulse. The gesture was gentle, almost unconscious, and it made Adana's breath catch for entirely different reasons. "What is it about you?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. His eyes searched her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Why can't I—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Can't what?" Adana asked softly. "Hurt you," he finished, the words dragging out of him like something torn free. "I couldn't make myself stop thinking about you. Not for a single day these past 2 months. And now—" His voice faltered, thick with frustration he didn't know how to control. "Now I can't even bring myself to hurt you." His throat moved as he swallowed hard, emotion flickering dangerously in his eyes. "Why?" he whispered, almost to himself. "What is it about you that gets inside my head like this, that won't let me breathe?" His hand trembled slightly before the tension drained from it. The grip at her throat loosened, his fingers sliding slowly, almost reverently, to cradle the side of her neck instead. The shift was so gentle it stole the air from her lungs. The threat dissolved into something far more intimate, far more confusing. His thumb brushed softly against her skin, as if memorizing the feel of her, as if afraid to let go. Adana's knees weakened beneath the weight of it, not fear this time, but the raw intensity of being wanted by the very man who was supposed to see her as his enemy. "Please," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for anymore. "I didn't kill your father. I swear on my mother's life. I'm telling the truth." They said she was a killer, but he saw something else. When Nigerian caregiver Adana is accused of murdering a Korean mafia boss's father, she doesn't just plead, she fights back. Now trapped in a gilded cage, working without pay for the man who wants her dead, she uncovers a conspiracy that will either save his life or end hers. Welcome to Afro-Korean romance cinema. If this is your first time here, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and become part of our tribe. This isn't a place for predictable endings or picture-perfect love. Here, we dive into intense chemistry, forbidden desires, and a ruthless mafia boss who would set the world on fire for his African sweetheart. If you're craving passion that defies the rules and a love story that walks the edge of danger, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's rewind to where everything changed. The day she became the prime suspect in his father's untimely death. 3 hours earlier. The water glass trembled in Adana's hand as she ran down the marble hallway. Her worn sneakers made soft squeaking sounds against the polished floor, a reminder that she didn't belong in this world of crystal chandeliers and imported art. She had been working as a caregiver for exactly 3 months. 3 months since she'd left Nigeria, left her sick mother and younger siblings behind, all for this job that paid enough to cover the surgery her mother desperately needed. The old man's room was at the end of the hall, behind heavy mahogany doors that probably cost more than her father's entire house back home. She pushed it open gently. "Mr. Choi?" she called softly. Jin-soo's father was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, looking out at the Seoul skyline. He was frail now, a shadow of the powerful man he'd once been, but his eyes were still sharp when he turned to look at her. "Water," he said in Korean. His voice was raspy, weak. Adana nodded and set the glass she'd brought on the side table. "I'll get fresh water for you, sir. This one is too warm." She hurried to the small kitchen attached to his suite. The tap ran cold, and she filled a new glass, adding ice the way he preferred. It took maybe 2 minutes, 3 at most. When she returned, the glass clutched carefully in both hands. The old man was slumped forward in his wheelchair. "Mr. Choi?" Adana's voice pitched higher. She rushed forward, setting the glass down with a clatter. "Mr. Choi!" His eyes were closed. His breathing, she couldn't hear his breathing. Adana's hands shook as she pressed the emergency button on the wall. Then she was running, throwing open the door, screaming for the guards in broken Korean and panicked English. "Help! Please! Mr. Choi! He's not breathing!" The guards came thundering down the hallway. Everything happened in a blur. They lifted the old man carefully, rushing him to the black SUV waiting in the underground garage. Adana climbed in, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She held his hand during the ride. His skin was cold, too cold. At the hospital, doctors swarmed. Adana was pushed aside, left standing in the sterile hallway, her uniform stained with sweat. She prayed, to God, to her ancestors, to anyone who might be listening. A doctor emerged 40 minutes later. His face was carefully neutral, the expression of someone who delivered bad news often. "I'm sorry. He didn't make it." The words didn't make sense at first. Adana stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. "What? But he was fine. He asked for water and I—" "The family has been notified," the doctor said, already turning away. "You should wait here." Jin-soo arrived like a storm. Adana heard him before she saw him, the sharp click of expensive shoes on tile, the low, urgent voices of his entourage. Then he swept around the corner, and she understood, for the first time, what people meant when they said a man had presence. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than she'd make in a year. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes so dark they looked black in the fluorescent hospital lights. His hair was swept back from his forehead, and there was something dangerous in the way he moved, like a predator who knew he was at the top of the food chain. This was Jin-soo, the man who'd destroyed her life back in Nigeria, the CEO who'd bought out her clinic, putting her out of work, as well as her home, the only property her father had left her and her family, which her uncle had wickedly sold for a hefty sum to Jin-soo's company, and her entire neighborhood without a second thought. And now, he was the son who'd just lost his father. Their eyes met across the hallway. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. His steps slowed, and Adana watched his eyes narrow as he studied her face. "He knows," she realized with a jolt of fear. "He remembers me. White walls, polished floors, the faint scent of antiseptic in the air." Doctors and nurses moved past them in a steady rhythm, but to him, the world narrowed to one person standing at the end of the corridor, Adana. It was the first time Jin-soo was seeing her again. She wore a caregiver's scrub, her light caramel skin glowing softly under the hospital lights. Her heart-shaped face was turned fully toward him. When their eyes had met, everything in her expression had changed. Recognition, then anger. Jin-soo stood frozen. He had faced rival bosses without hesitation. He had ordered men twice his size to their knees. Yet seeing her again, after Nigeria, after the protest, after the tomato striking his chest in front of cameras and chanting crowds, made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't control. He remembered that day vividly, her voice rising above the protesters, her eyes blazing as she accused him of stealing her future. His company had acquired the struggling clinic where she worked, legally, efficiently, without emotion. Later, after he had looked into her, he'd learned about the house, how her uncle had secretly sold the family property to his corporation for a price too tempting to refuse. At the time, it had been business. Now it had a face. Her face. He walked toward her slowly, polished shoes quiet against the tiles. Nurses instinctively stepped aside. Even here, in a hospital corridor, he carried the weight of power. His black suit was sharp, his black shirt halfway unbuttoned, subtle ink visible along his collarbone and neck. Controlled. Untouchable. Except he didn't feel untouchable. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, woodsy, intoxicating, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You," he said quietly, not respectfully, not warmly, just accusation wrapped in a single word, carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Sir, I know you." His hand shot out, gripping her upper arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make it clear she wasn't going anywhere. "Nigeria, 2 months ago." Adana's heart stopped. "The protest," Jin-soo continued, his eyes boring into hers. "You threw a tomato at my face. You stood outside my office screaming about justice." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You called me a thief, a colonizer. You said I destroyed your life." "You did," Adana said before she could stop herself, her defiance flaring despite her fear. "You bought my home, my workplace. You left us with nothing." Something flashed in Jin-soo's eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she dared to talk back. His grip on her arm tightened fractionally. "And now you're here," he said softly, dangerously. "Working in my house, taking care of my father." He paused, and his voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Or should I say, failing to take care of my father." "I didn't fail," Adana shot back, anger overriding fear. "He was fine when I left him. I was only gone for 2 minutes." "2 minutes for my father to die alone," Jin-soo interrupted. "How convenient." "It's not convenient, it's the truth." "Is it?" His free hand came up, and he gripped her chin, forcing her to maintain eye contact. His fingers were warm against her skin, and Adana hated that even in this moment of terror, she was aware of how close he was, how his touch sent electricity through her. "Or is this exactly what you wanted? Revenge against the man who ruined your life?" "That's insane," Adana breathed. "I need this job. My mother needs surgery. Why would I throw that away?" "Maybe someone paid you more than I ever could," Jin-soo suggested. His thumb traced her jawline, a gesture that felt both threatening and oddly intimate. "Maybe my enemies found a disgruntled Nigerian girl with a grudge and made her an offer. I don't know your enemies. I don't know anything about your world. Her voice cracked. "I just needed to save my mother." For a moment, something in Jin-soo's expression faltered. His grip on her chin softened, though his thumb still rested against her jaw. He felt the warmth of her skin, the faint tremble in her breath, and it unsettled him. She was the prime suspect in his father's death. He should feel anger, nothing else. But instead, he felt shaken, aware of her, aware of how easily her touch affected him, aware of the guilt rising in his chest when he looked into her frightened eyes. She was the enemy. So why did he suddenly feel like he was the one losing control? They stood frozen like that, his dark eyes searching hers, looking for lies, for truth, for something. "Mr. Choi," one of the guards interrupted, "the doctor needs to speak with you about the autopsy." Jin-soo's jaw clenched. He released Adana abruptly and turned to the guard. "Put her in a private room. I'll deal with her later." They put her in a small room in the hospital basement. It wasn't a cell, but it might as well have been. A guard stood outside the door. Adana sat on the plastic chair and put her head in her hands. This couldn't be happening. She'd done everything right. She'd followed protocol. The old man had been fine, just tired, and then… Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from her friend Chinwe back in Nigeria, who worked at the hospital treating her mother. "Good news! The surgery is scheduled for next week. The payment came through." Adana stared at the message. Payment? She'd only managed to pay a quarter of the fees. The rest was supposed to be installments over the next year. Where had… The door flew open. Jin-soo stood in the doorway, and somehow he seemed even larger in the small room. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock made Adana's breath catch. "The autopsy came back," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Adana stood up quickly, her back hitting the wall. "What did it say?" Jin-soo pulled out his phone, turned it to show her the screen. Medical jargon filled the display, but one word stood out in bold: poison. Adana felt the blood drain from her face. "No, poison," Jin-soo repeated. He took a step toward her, and Adana instinctively pressed harder against the wall. "In his system. Someone gave it to him." Another step. "You were the last person with him." I would never." "You had a motive," he continued, closing the distance between them with predatory grace. "You hate me. You hate my company." He was right in front of her now, close enough that he could see the tiny flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from her body. "What better revenge than to kill my father?" "That's insane!" Adana's voice rose. "I need this job. I don't know anything about poison. His hand rose to her neck, fingers resting lightly against her skin. He wasn't squeezing, just holding her there, close enough to feel the quick rhythm of her pulse beneath his thumb. Adana gasped, her hands flying up to grip his wrist. But she didn't pull, didn't fight. She just stared up at him, her chest heaving, her heart hammering against his palm. "Is that why?" he breathed, his face inches from hers. "Why you accepted the job that was so far away from your country?" And his eyes raked over her features, her wide, frightened eyes, her parted lips, the smooth brown skin of her throat under his hand. "To get your revenge against me?" "I'm innocent," Adana whispered, hating how breathless she sounded. "Please, believe me." Jin-soo's grip tightened fractionally, and Adana's breath hitched. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then slowly dragged back up to her eyes. "You killed my father," he said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper that made her skin prickle. "Tell me, who sent you, or did you do it for revenge?" "No one sent me," Adana said, her voice trembling but defiant. "I didn't kill anyone. I'm a caregiver, not an assassin." "Are you?" His free hand came up, bracing against the wall beside her head, caging her in. He leaned closer, and Adana could feel his breath on her face, could see the war raging behind those beautiful, unforgiving eyes. "The security footage was deleted. The camera in my father's room. Someone wiped it during the exact time you claim you were getting water." "I didn't delete anything," Adana said, and despite the hand on her throat, despite the fear coursing through her, she met his gaze steadily. "I don't even know how to do that." "Convenient. It's the truth." They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension that was equal parts dangerous and electric. Adana was acutely aware of every point where his body almost touched hers, his hand on her throat, his arm beside her head, the scant inches between them. "I should kill you," Jin-soo said, his voice cracking, his mind raging and confused. "That's what I do to traitors. I make examples of them." "I'm not a traitor," Adana whispered, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm innocent." Jin-soo's thumb moved against her throat, tracing the line of her racing pulse. The gesture was gentle, almost unconscious, and it made Adana's breath catch for entirely different reasons. "What is it about you?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. His eyes searched her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Why can't I—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Can't what?" Adana asked softly. "Hurt you," he finished, the words dragging out of him like something torn free. I couldn't make myself stop thinking about you. Not for a single day these past 2 months. And now? His voice faltered, thick with frustration he didn't know how to control. Now I can't even bring myself to hurt you. His throat moved as he swallowed hard, emotion flickering dangerously in his eyes. Why? He whispered, almost to himself. What is it about you that gets inside my head like this, that won't let me breathe? His hand trembled slightly before the tension drained from it. The grip at her throat loosened, his fingers sliding slowly, almost reverently, to cradle the side of her neck instead. The shift was so gentle it stole the air from her lungs. The threat dissolved into something far more intimate, far more confusing. His thumb brushed softly against her skin, as if memorizing the feel of her, as if afraid to let go. Adana's knees weakened beneath the weight of it. Not fear this time, but the raw intensity of being wanted by the very man who was supposed to see her as his enemy. Please, she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for anymore. I didn't kill your father. I swear on my mother's life. I'm telling the truth. Jin-soo stared at her for a long moment, then slowly he stepped back, releasing her. The loss of his touch left Adana feeling strangely bereft, even as relief flooded through her. I want to believe you, he said, running a hand through his hair. But the evidence is wrong, Adana said firmly. She pushed off the wall, standing straight despite her trembling legs. Someone is setting me up. Someone deleted that footage. Someone poisoned your father, and they're trying to make me take the fall. Jin-soo's eyes narrowed. Why you? Because I'm convenient, Adana said. I'm new. I'm foreign. I had access to your father. She took a shaky breath. And because you already hated me. Because of Nigeria. Because I was that girl who embarrassed you in public. It's the perfect setup. Jin-soo went very still. She could see his mind working, processing, analyzing. You're right, he said finally. It is the perfect setup. He looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Too perfect. Hope flickered in Adana's chest. So you believe me? I believe that I need more information before I make a final judgment, Jin-soo said carefully. But in the meantime... He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard. You're not going anywhere. You'll stay in my house, where I can watch you. You'll work for my family, no pay, for as long as I decide. But my mother, she needs... Your mother's surgery has been paid for, Jin-soo said. Full amount, plus 6 months of follow-up care. Adana's mouth fell open. That was you? Consider it an investment, he said coldly, contradicting the great gesture of kindness he had just shown her, or the softness of his touch mere moments ago. If you're innocent, you'll work off the debt. If you're guilty... His eyes went dark. Then your mother will at least be healthy when I make you pay for what you've done. Adana's throat tightened. And if I refuse? Then I turn you over to the police, Jin-soo said simply, with all the evidence pointing to you as my father's killer. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice at all. Fine, Adana said, lifting her chin. I'll stay, I'll work, and when you finally realize I'm telling the truth, I expect an apology. Something that might have been amusement flickered in Jin-soo's eyes. You expect an apology from me? You accused me of murder, Adana said, grabbed me by the throat, threatened to kill me. Yes, I expect an apology. Jin-soo moved so fast she didn't have time to react. Suddenly, he was right in front of her again, his hand cupping her jaw, tilting her face up to his. You have courage, I'll give you that, he murmured, his dark eyes locked on hers. Most people cower when I threaten them, but you... His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You throw it back in my face. Adana's heart hammered in her chest. I'm not most people. No, Jin-soo agreed softly, his gaze dropping to her lips. You're not. For a breathless moment, Adana thought he might kiss her. The air between them was charged, heavy with something dangerous and intoxicating. His hand was warm on her face, his body close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Then he stepped back abruptly. The moment shattered. "The driver will take you back to the house," he said, his voice once again cold and controlled. "You start tomorrow. And Adana?" He paused at the door, looking back at her. "If I find out you're lying to me, if I discover even a shred of evidence that you were involved..." His smile was the most dangerous thing she'd ever seen. "I'll make you wish you died with him." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Adana sank to the floor, her legs finally giving out. Her hand went to her throat, where she could still feel the ghost of his touch. She was in so much trouble, and not just because he thought she was a killer. 2 months later. The bucket was heavy in Adana's hands as she scrubbed the already spotless marble floor of Jin-Soo's study. Her knees ached, her back ached, everything ached. This was her life now. The other staff avoided her. They knew she was the one who'd been with the old master when he died. Some thought she was a killer. Others just thought she was cursed. Either way, no one wanted to associate with her. She worked from dawn until late at night, cleaning, cooking, whatever menial task they could think of, and all without pay. Her mother's surgery had happened 3 weeks ago. Chinwei said it was successful, that her mother was recovering well. Adana should have felt grateful, and she did, she was, but she also felt trapped by debt, trapped by suspicion, trapped by the way Jin-Soo looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, because that was the worst part. The way he watched her. He barely spoke to her, would walk past her in the hallways like she was furniture, but she could feel his eyes on her, tracking her movements, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. And sometimes when their paths crossed, when he handed her something and their fingers brushed, when he reached past her to grab a file and his body pressed close to hers for just a second, the air would crackle with the same electricity from that hospital room, the same dangerous, impossible tension. Adana wrung out her cloth and reached under Jin-Soo's massive desk to wipe away a speck of dust that probably no one but her would ever notice. That's when she heard the voices. "Finally time to make our move." Adana froze, her heart suddenly pounding. "Are you sure about this?" That was a woman's voice, smooth, cultured, Jin-Soo's stepmother. "I'm sure." A man's voice this time, deep, confident. "Jin-Soo has gotten too comfortable. He thinks he's untouchable." Adana's breath caught. She should announce herself, should cough or make some noise, but something kept her silent, hidden beneath the desk like a rabbit hiding from wolves. "The opening ceremony is perfect," the man continued. "Public venue, lots of people, lots of confusion. The sniper will take him out clean. It'll look like a rival family. Nothing will trace back to us." "And you're certain your man won't miss, Ji-hyuk?" the stepmother asked. "He doesn't miss." There was a smile in the man's voice. "I've used him before. He's a professional." Adana's mind reeled. Ji-hyuk, Jin-Soo's best friend who was also his business partner. Good. The stepmother's heels clicked as she moved across the room. "I should have been in the will. All those years playing the dutiful wife, and the old fool left me nothing, forcing my hand and making me kill him. Well, once Jin-Soo is gone, you'll take control of the company, and I'll finally get what I deserve." 50-50 split, Ji-hyuk said. "Don't forget our agreement." "I never forget business arrangements. That's why we make such good partners." They laughed, and the sound made Adana's skin crawl. 3 days, Ji-hyuk said. "The mall opening is in 3 days. After that, the company is ours, and Jin-Soo will be nothing but a memory." Footsteps approached the desk. Adana pressed herself flat against the floor, her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle her breathing. "What about the girl?" the stepmother asked. "The Nigerian. Do we need to deal with her?" "She's nothing," Ji-hyuk said dismissively. "Jin-Soo keeps her around like a pet project. We only needed her to take the fall for his father's death anyway. So once Jin-Soo is gone, we'll send her back to whatever slum she came from." The door closed. Silence fell over the study. Adana remained frozen under the desk, her mind racing. They were going to kill Jin-soo. His own stepmother and his best friend were planning to murder him. Part of her, the part that still hated him for destroying her life in Nigeria, for accusing her of murder, for putting his hand around her throat, wanted to do nothing, wanted to let fate take its course. But another part, a larger part, recoiled at the idea. Because despite everything, despite the accusations and the unpaid labor and the constant suspicion, Jin-soo had paid for her mother's surgery. He'd set up funds for her siblings' education. He'd been cruel, yes, but he'd also been not entirely heartless. After all he had done for her, plus the fact that he had given better employment to all the workers back in Nigeria who had been displaced from their jobs because of his company, she started to see him in a different light. And there was something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely. Something about the way her pulse raced when he was near, the way her skin burned where he'd touched her, the way she caught herself thinking about his hands, his eyes, his mouth. No, she couldn't think about that. Adana waited another 5 minutes before crawling out from under the desk. Her legs were cramped, pins and needles shooting through them. She had to warn him. But how? He'd never believe her. He already thought she might be a killer. If she walked up to him and said his stepmother and best friend were plotting his death, he'd probably think it was some elaborate scheme. She needed proof, or at the very least, she needed to make him cautious enough to protect himself. Adana looked around the study, her mind working. Then she grabbed a piece of paper from the waste bin and a pen from the desk. She wrote with her left hand, disguising her handwriting before tucking the little paper between some files on his desk. Your life is in danger. It was a start. For 3 days, Adana left warning notes for Jin-soo in places only he would see them. The second note Adana left in Jin-soo's bathroom, tucked into the mirror frame where only he would see it. They're planning to kill you at the mall opening. She wrote it on a piece of paper torn from an old notebook, using her left hand to disguise her handwriting. The second note went into his suit jacket pocket. Trust no one, especially those closest to you. The third note she slipped into his briefcase. The sniper will be positioned in the building across the street. She watched him from the shadows, trying to gauge his reaction. Did he seem more alert, more suspicious? It was hard to tell. His face was always a mask of cool control. The morning of the mall opening, Adana woke with a sense of dread sitting heavy in her chest. She'd done everything she could. If Jin-soo ignored her warnings, if he still went to that ceremony, she found the head maid in the kitchen. Is Mr. Choi still going to the mall opening tonight? The woman gave her a suspicious look. Why do you care? I heard some staff talking about it. I was curious. The head maid sniffed. Of course he's going. It's the biggest opening of the year. Why wouldn't he go? Adana's stomach dropped. He was still going. Despite all her warnings, he was still walking straight into a trap. That evening, Adana stood in front of her tiny mirror in the servants' quarters, staring at her reflection. She was wearing jeans and worn sneakers, all she had. She wasn't supposed to attend the opening. Staff wasn't invited, but she was going anyway. She'd slipped out of the house during the chaos of preparations, caught a bus to the mall. Now she stood across the street, watching the red carpet being rolled out, the cameras being set up, the security teams doing their sweeps. Jin-soo would be here soon. And so would the sniper. Adana scanned the buildings around the mall. There, directly opposite, a tall office building with a clear view of the entrance, the perfect vantage point. Her hands trembled. This was insane. She should just call the police. But she'd tried that already. The officer she'd spoken to had laughed at her, told her to stop making prank calls about Mafia bosses. Apparently, Jin-soo's legitimate business empire was a good enough cover that even the police didn't take threats against him seriously. So it was up to her. Adana pushed through the gathering crowd, women in glittering gowns, men in tuxedos. She stuck out like a sore thumb in her casual clothes, but she didn't care. She kept her eyes locked on the entrance. And then she saw him. Jin-soo stepped out of a sleek black car, and even from a distance, Adana could feel the shift in the atmosphere. People turned to look at him. Cameras flashed. He was wearing a black suit with a deep blue tie that made his eyes look even darker, and his hair was perfectly styled. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, shaking hands, offering that devastating smile that never quite reached his eyes. Security flanked him on all sides, but Adana knew it wouldn't matter. A skilled sniper could take the shot through the smallest gap. She pushed closer, earning angry looks from the well-dressed attendees. Jin-soo reached the ribbon stretched across the mall entrance. Someone handed him a comically large pair of scissors. He said something that made the crowd laugh. And that's when Adana saw it, the red dot. It was tiny, almost invisible, dancing across Jin-soo's chest, right over his heart. Everything seemed to slow down. Adana's eyes followed the trajectory back to the office building opposite the mall. There, barely visible through an open window on the 15th floor, was a figure in black. The sniper. Adana didn't think, didn't plan. She just ran. She shoved through the crowd, ignoring the shouts of protest. Security moved to intercept her, but she was small and fast and desperate. "Jin-soo!" she screamed. He turned toward her voice, his eyes widening in recognition and surprise. For a split second, their gazes locked across the distance, and Adana saw confusion flash in his dark eyes. Then she threw herself forward with all her strength, her shoulder connecting with his chest. They went down together, Jin-soo's arms instinctively wrapping around her as they hit the ground. His body cushioned her fall, his grip tight and protective, even as he had no idea why she was tackling him. The world exploded. Glass shattered behind them in a cascade of crystal rain. People screamed. More gunshots rang out. 1, 2, 3, as the sniper tried to adjust his aim. Security swarmed in, forming a human shield around them. Jin-soo rolled, covering Adana's body with his own, protecting her from the falling glass. "Stay down," he growled in her ear, his weight pressing her into the ground. But through all of it, even with the chaos erupting around them, Adana was aware of every point where Jin-soo's body touched hers. The solid wall of his chest against her back, his arms caging her in, his breath hot against her neck. The gunfire stopped. Shouts filled the air as security teams moved to secure the area. Jin-soo shifted slightly, and Adana turned her head to look at him. His face was inches from hers, his dark eyes searching her face with an intensity that stole her breath. "You saved me," he said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. There was wonder in his tone, and confusion, and something else. Something that made Adana's heart skip. "Why?" Adana opened her mouth to answer, but suddenly everything felt wrong. Her side was warm, too warm, and wet. She looked down. Her white t-shirt was blooming red. Jin-soo's eyes went wide. "Adana." His hand went to her side, and when he pulled it away, his palm was covered in blood. "No, no, no, no." His voice cracked, the cool control shattering. "Medic, I need a medic team now." "It's okay," Adana said, though black spots were dancing in her vision. "You're safe. That's what matters." "You're insane," Jin-soo said, his hand pressing against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. His other hand cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. "You're completely insane. Why would you—" "I heard them," Adana interrupted, her words slurring slightly. "Ji-hyuk and your stepmother. They planned this. They killed your father too, poisoned him." She struggled to focus on his face. "I tried to warn you. The notes." Understanding dawned in Jin-soo's eyes. "The notes. That was you." "Didn't want you to die," Adana mumbled. The world was getting dark around the edges, like a photograph fading. "Even though you're kind of an asshole." "Adana, stay with me." Jin-soo's voice was sharp with panic, a tone she'd never heard from him before. "Look at me. Keep your eyes open." "Your stepmother," Adana managed. "She wasn't in the will. That's why—" "I don't care about that right now," Jin-soo said fiercely. His hand was still on her face, and Adana thought absently that she'd never seen him look so scared. "Just stay awake. The medics are coming. Just stay awake." I'm innocent, Adana whispered, feeling the darkness pulling at her. About your father. I didn't. I know, Jin-soo said, and his voice broke. I know you didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just please, please don't. But the darkness was too strong. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Jin-soo's face above hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real fear in his eyes. Then nothing. Want to know if Adana survives? What happens when she wakes up after taking a bullet meant for the man who once accused her of murder? And how will Jin-soo react when the woman he doubted nearly dies protecting him? But the danger isn't over. Adana's abusive ex has resurfaced, and he knows exactly how to exploit her connection to Jin-soo. At the same time, Jin-soo's rivals are closing in, determined to destroy him by hurting the one person he's grown to care about. Will this bullet change everything between them, or make them even bigger targets? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Drop a comment. Was Adana brave or reckless? And tell me this, if you were Jin-soo, would you finally trust her? Or would doubt still linger? And one more question. Do you think her ex will try to win her back? Or use her to get to Jin-soo? And show some love with a like if you're ready for a romance that burns hotter than revenge. Part 2 is coming, and trust me, the war is just beginning.